the door that silenced a forest. There are places on this earth that hold a memory. Not in the way a human mind remembers, with fleeting images and fading emotions, but in a more fundamental way. The memory is baked into the soil, etched into the bark of ancient trees, and carried on the silent currents of the air. These places remember what we have long forgotten, or perhaps what we were never meant to know. Most of the time, these memories lie dormant. They are the quiet hum beneath the symphony of the wild, the rustle of leaves, the call of a distant bird, the snap of a twig under an unseen hoof. Life, in all its vibrant, chaotic glory, keeps these older, darker memories in check. But what happens when that symphony stops? What happens when the vibrant pulse of life is extinguished, not by fire, not by flood, but by something else entirely? Welcome to the Wilderness Protocol. Today, we venture into the unnerving silence of a place that was once alive with sound, a place now spoken of only in hushed tones and redacted reports. We are talking about the sprawling 200,000-acre expanse formerly known as Whispering Pines National Park. And we are here to recount the story of the last group of people to ever hear its song and the impossible object they found at its heart. This is the story of a group of tourists, a door in the woods, and why, for the last decade, Whispering Pines has been utterly, supernaturally silent. There is a fundamental contract between us and the natural world. We agree to respect its power, and in return, it offers us a profound, if sometimes unforgiving, beauty. We walk its paths, breathe its air, and listen to its voice. But what happens when the wilderness breaks that contract? What happens when its voice, a symphony composed of a million tiny movements and calls, simply stops? Before it was erased from public maps, before the razor wire and the stern, unblinking warnings from the Department of the Interior, Whispering Pines National Park was the embodiment of this contract. It was a sprawling, 200,000-acre sanctuary of life, a place defined not just by its sights, but by its sounds. The park's name was not a poetic flourish. It was a literal description. The gentle, persistent wind moving through the vast stands of ancient Douglas fir and western hemlock created a unique acoustic phenomenon, a soft, sibilant whisper that was the park's constant, calming heartbeat. Hikers would write entire journal entries about the sheer diversity of birdsong that greeted them at dawn, a complex chorus that shifted with the seasons. At night, the thrumming of crickets, the deep croak of bullfrogs from the glacial lakes, and the distant, lonely howl of coyote packs would create a rich sonic blanket, a reassurance that you were in a place teeming with life. It was a living, breathing ecosystem, and like any living thing, its lifeblood was its pulse, its voice. Our story begins in the final golden weeks of summer 2025. The air was warm and smelled of pine needles and damp earth. The skies were a brilliant, cloudless blue. It was a perfect time for the last wave of seasonal tourists to seek solace in the wild before the coming of autumn. Among them was a group of 4 friends. This trip was an annual tradition, a ritual they had honored since their chaotic college days. It is crucial to understand that these were not novices. They were not careless city dwellers who stumbled into the woods unprepared. They were experienced hikers, methodical in their planning, deeply respectful of the wilderness they so loved. This fact is important because what happened to them was not a consequence of foolishness or naivete. It was a consequence of a far more fundamental human trait, curiosity. And in this place, on this trip, that curiosity would prove to be a catastrophic flaw. Let's put names to the faces. Let's remember them as they were, before the silence. First, there was Liam Sullivan. A geologist by profession, he was the group's de facto leader. At 32, he was a man who saw the world in layers, in strata, in measurable forces and predictable outcomes. He was grounded, practical, a believer in the scientific method. For him, the wilderness was a physical text, a story told in rock formations and erosion patterns. He was there to disconnect from his data-driven world and reconnect with something tangible, something he could hold in his hand. Then there was Chloe Reed, 29, a budding documentarian and vlogger with a passion for storytelling. Her camera was a permanent extension of her arm, its lens her second set of eyes. She was meticulously chronicling their journey for her small but dedicated online channel, The Extraordinary Ordinary. Her goal, as she often stated, was to find the moments of wonder hidden in plain sight. Her footage, or what little of it was ever recovered, would become the Rosetta Stone for understanding this entire, inexplicable event. Dr. Maya Sharma, 33, was a corporate lawyer. She was the anchor of the group, the voice of relentless pragmatism. Sharp-witted, fiercely intelligent, and skeptical by nature, her mind was trained to dissect arguments, find flaws, and demand evidence. For Maya, these trips were a necessary pressure valve, a calculated escape from the high-stakes, adversarial world of mergers and acquisitions. She was there to find peace by imposing order on a small, manageable corner of the world, their campsite, their route, their supplies. And finally, there was Benjamin "Ben" Carter. At 30, he was a music teacher and the quietest, most introspective member of the group. Ben was a man who experienced the world through his ears. He possessed a rare sensitivity to the nuances of sound pitch, timbre, and rhythm. He wasn't just there to see the park. He was there to listen to it. Tucked carefully into his pack was a small, high-fidelity audio recorder and a set of professional-grade headphones. He dreamed of capturing the unique acoustics of the deep forest, the pure, unpolluted soundscape of whispering pines. Their plan was ambitious, but not reckless. A 3-day, 25-mile loop through the park's rugged northern territory, culminating in a rarely visited basin known as Ethelred Gorge. It was a trail marked strenuous, a challenge they had prepared for and looked forward to. On the morning of Tuesday, August 19, 2025, Liam signed their hiking plan at the North Fork Ranger Station. They posed for one last photo, smiling, their faces full of anticipation. Then they stepped onto the trailhead, their boots crunching on the gravel path, and vanished from the world of normalcy. For the first day and a half, everything was perfect. It was idyllic. The recovered fragments from Chloe's camera memory card attest to this. We see them laughing as they cross a log bridge over a rushing creek. We see Liam pointing out a band of schist in a rock outcropping, explaining its geological history. We see Maya, for once without a furrowed brow, simply looking up at the majestic, towering trees. We hear their voices, clear and joyful. Ben's audio recordings from that first day are a treasure. They are lush, layered, and vibrant. He captured the percussive tap of a woodpecker, the delicate trill of a varied thrush, the low hum of bees in a patch of wild lavender. And underneath it all, the park's signature sound, the constant, gentle shh of the wind through the pines. It was a world alive with sound. They made camp that first night by a creek, its gurgling water a constant, soothing presence. The world was exactly as it should be. The contract was being honored. The change began on the second day, shortly after their midday meal. It was subtle at first, a single thread pulled from a complex tapestry. We see it in one of Chloe's recovered video files, time-stamped at 1:47 p.m. The group is taking a short break. Liam is in the middle of a sentence talking about their pace. He suddenly stops. He cocks his head, his expression shifting from casual conversation to faint confusion. The camera is on him. "Is it just me?" he asks, his voice clear in the footage. "Or did it just get quiet?" Maya, examining a blister on her heel, looks up and scoffs playfully. It's a forest, Liam, not a rock concert. It's supposed to be quiet. But Ben, who had been sitting on a fallen log with his headphones on, slowly pulls the cups from his ears. A frown etches its way across his face. No, Ben says. His voice, captured by Chloe's camera microphone, is laced with a professional concern. He's right. The birds, they've stopped singing. He looks around at the dense canopy. All of them, at once. This is the first documented moment of the phenomenon. The first note in a symphony of silence. They try to rationalize it as anyone would. Chloe suggests a hawk or an eagle might be circling overhead, scaring the smaller birds into silence. Liam agrees, adding that a sudden drop in air pressure, maybe a coming storm, could have the same effect. They packed up their things and pressed on, but a new, unspoken tension had settled over the group. The silence did not relent. It deepened. Over the next hour, other sounds began to peel away. The constant, almost subliminal buzz of insects, the background static of any summer day faded to nothing. The rustle of chipmunks or squirrels in the undergrowth, a sound so common it's barely noticed, was gone. The forest floor was still. The only sounds that remained were their own. The crunch of their boots on dry leaves and pine needles. The rhythmic swish of their nylon pants. Their own breathing, which now seemed unervingly loud in the dead air. They began to walk farther apart, as if the sounds of each other's presence were an irritation. In another recovered clip, timestamped at 3:12 p.m., the mood has transformed entirely. The easy camaraderie is gone, replaced by a tense, watchful anxiety. They speak in low voices, almost whispers, as if afraid of disturbing a great, sleeping presence. "This is wrong," Ben whispers, his face pale and slick with sweat. He's no longer using his recorder. Sound doesn't just go away. Not all of it. This feels like a vacuum. My ears are starting to pop. Liam, the scientist, is visibly struggling to fit this new data into his understanding of the world. He pulls out his professional-grade compass. The needle isn't pointing north. It's spinning lazily, uselessly, in its housing. He swears under his breath. He pulls out his phone to check his GPS app. The screen displays a single, bleak message. Searching for signal. This was not entirely unusual for such a remote area, but combined with the unnatural quiet and the compass failure, it added a thick, cold layer of dread to their journey. They were lost, not just geographically but sensorially. The wilderness, which is supposed to communicate through 1,000 subtle cues of sound, sight, and feeling, had gone mute. They were walking through a beautiful three-dimensional photograph, a perfect replica of a forest, but one that was utterly devoid of the energy of life. It was in this state of heightened anxiety, sensory deprivation, and burgeoning fear that they stumbled off the faint trail and into a small, unnaturally perfect clearing. And in the center of that clearing, where no man-made structure could or should have been, stood a single, solitary, impossible object. It was a door. Let us pause and attempt to comprehend the sheer, dislocating impossibility of this discovery. A door. Not a door set in the crumbling stone of a forgotten ruin, nor one hanging from the rotting frame of an abandoned trapper's cabin. This was a freestanding door, complete with a dark, polished frame, planted in the soil and leaf litter of the forest floor as if it had grown there. It defied logic. It defied physics. It defied sanity. Chloe Reed's camera was rolling, and the recovered footage, though shaky and disoriented, captures the group's stunned, silent disbelief. For nearly a full minute there is no dialogue. The only sound is the heavy, unsteady breathing of the person behind the lens. The camera pans from the door to the faces of her friends. Liam, his mouth slightly agape, his scientific certainty shattered. Maya, her arms crossed tightly, her expression a mask of hardened denial. Ben, his face ashen, looking at the object with an expression of primal fear, as if recognizing an ancient predator. It was Maya, the lawyer, the one who builds arguments and lives in a world of facts and precedents, who finally broke the spell. Her voice, when it comes, is a strained, incredulous whisper. "What is that?" Liam took a hesitant step forward, then another, beginning to circle the object as a geologist would a strange and unidentifiable rock formation. The camera followed him. "It can't be," he muttered, mostly to himself. "It just can't be." The door was made of a dark, almost black wood, the grain of which was unlike any native species in the park. It was smooth to the touch, yet it seemed to absorb the surrounding light, possessing a strange, dull, non-reflective finish. The frame was perfectly squared. The joints were seamless. There were no nails, no screws, no visible signs of construction. Simply was. From the back, it was even more absurd. It was just a frame, a rectangular hole through which you could see the trees and ferns on the other side, untouched and undisturbed. It was a prop, cosmic joke. It had to be. Some kind of guerrilla art installation? Liam suggested, his voice lacking any real conviction. But who would haul this all the way out here? There are no tracks, no drag marks. Ben, who had been scanning the ground around the clearing, shook his head. His voice was trembling. "He's right. There are no tracks. Not even ours seem right. It's like the ground here is new. It's like this whole clearing it grew here with the door." The debate that followed, captured in the fragmented audio from Chloe's camera, is a chilling study in human psychology breaking down under the weight of the impossible. For what the timestamps on the files suggest was nearly an hour, they argued, their voices hushed and tense in the oppressive silence. Maya immediately took the position of prosecutor against the object. "I don't care what it is," she stated, her voice low and firm. "Look where we are. We are off the trail. Our navigation equipment is non-functional. The entire forest has gone dead silent. This is a confluence of wrongness, and that is its epicenter. It is an aberration, and we have no business being near it. We need to turn back. Now." Liam, however, was trapped between his fear and his lifelong need to analyze and understand. "It has to be a hallucination," he argued, trying to convince himself as much as the others. "Mass hysteria, brought on by stress, maybe infrasound or the lack of it, is playing tricks on our equilibrium. I need to touch it. I need to get a sample. I have to confirm it's solid." Chloe, the documentarian, saw the story of a lifetime. Her fear was palpable, but it was overshadowed by a creator's desperate need to capture the sublime. "This is it," she whispered, her eye pressed to the viewfinder. "This is the thing. Liam, people won't believe this. I barely believe this. We have to see what's on the other side. What if it's a hoax? We have to know." It was Ben who articulated the pure, unreasoning terror of the situation. He seemed to be shrinking in on himself, his gaze fixed on the tarnished brass doorknob as if it were the eye of a serpent. "Don't you feel it?" he pleaded, his voice cracking. "It's not just quiet here. It's listening. The silence isn't empty. It's full. It's full of waiting. The door, it's the source of it. I can feel it in my bones. It's like a note of music that's so low you can't hear it, but you can feel it vibrating through the floor, making your teeth ache. That's what this is. It's a source of nothing, and it wants us to open it." His words hung in the dead air. The argument was a stalemate between rational fear, scientific curiosity, and artistic ambition. But curiosity, as it so often does, is a powerful and insidious force. It chipped away at their fear, reframing it as a challenge. Liam made the decision. "I'm just going to touch it," he declared, his voice tight, "to prove it's real. Then we can decide." "Liam, don't," Maya warned, her voice sharp, but he was already moving. Chloe's camera zooms in, capturing every detail. We see Liam's hand, tanned and steady, reaching out. We see his fingers make contact with the dark wood of the doorframe. He recoiled for a second, then touched it again, more firmly. "It's real," he breathed, his voice a mixture of awe and terror. "God, it's real. And it's cold. It's unnaturally cold." He traced the edge of the frame, then his hand moved to the centerpiece of the tableau. The simple, tarnished brass doorknob. This was the point of no return, a threshold of action from which they could not retreat. The footage shows him wrapping his fingers around it. In the background, Ben lets out a soft, whimpering sound. "Don't, Liam. Please," Maya said, her voice no longer commanding but pleading. He looked back at his friends, his face a mask of conflict. Then he looked at the door. He turned the knob. There was a soft, metallic click, a completely mundane sound, the sound of a latch retracting inside a mechanism. But in the profound, dead silence of that forest, it was as loud and as final as a gavel striking wood. The sound seemed to be instantly swallowed, absorbed by the oppressive quiet that surrounded them. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Liam pulled the door open. It swung inward, away from him, without a creak. The footage from Chloe's camera becomes chaotic here, whipping back and forth between the doorway and the horrified faces of the group. But the audio is chillingly, perfectly clear. There was no sound from beyond the threshold. No gust of wind, no change in pressure. Nothing. They were not looking into a dark space. They were looking at the absence of space itself. It was a perfect, sharp-edged rectangle of pure, unadulterated nothingness, cut into the fabric of the world. It did not reflect light, consumed it. The sunlight that dappled the forest floor seemed to bend and stretch into the void, vanishing forever. "My God," Liam whispered. He was transfixed, his face bathed in the non-light from the doorway. His expression was not one of fear, but of a deeper, soul-shattering horror. The look of a man who has just seen the fundamental truth of the universe and wishes he hadn't. "Close it!" Ben screamed, his voice raw and ragged with panic. "For the love of God, Liam, close the door." But it was too late. The silence, which had been a passive, oppressive blanket, now changed its nature. It became an active, malevolent force. Ben's high-fidelity audio recorder, which he had left running on his pack, suddenly emitted a high-pitched shriek of electronic feedback, the sound of circuits being fundamentally violated before falling utterly silent, its indicator lights dead. "It's coming out," Chloe yelled from behind the camera, her voice rising in hysteria. "The nothing is coming out." She was right. The silence, the wrongness, was bleeding out of the open doorway. It was a visible phenomenon, though it had no color or substance. The vibrant green leaves on the trees nearest the door began to dim, their color desaturating as if being drained by an invisible siphon. A small, delicate fern growing near the threshold visibly withered, its fronds curling and turning a brittle, lifeless gray in a matter of seconds. This was not a natural process. This was an ontological blight, a corruption of existence itself, spreading like a stain. What happened next is the most disturbing part of the entire recovered record. Liam, still staring into the void, his will seemingly not his own, took a single shuffling step forward. His foot lifted, poised to cross the threshold into the absolute nothingness. "Liam, no!" Maya shrieked. Her paralysis broke. In a burst of adrenaline, she lunged forward, grabbing his arm with both hands. She caught him just in time, yanking him backward with all her strength just as the toe of his hiking boot was about to cross the plane of the doorway. But in that split second of contact, the footage shows a flicker. A watery, heat-hazed distortion in the air around Liam's lower leg, as if it had been briefly dipped in a pool of clear, boiling gelatin. Liam cried out, a sharp, guttural sound of pain and surprise, and stumbled backward, falling heavily to the ground. Maya scrambled away from the door on her hands and knees, dragging him with her, her face a mask of pure terror. It was Chloe, still filming, who broke from her role as observer and became a participant. Spurred by a final, desperate instinct for self-preservation, she ran forward, ignoring the terrifying cold radiating from the opening. She grabbed the edge of the impossible door, and with a desperate cry, she slammed it shut. The latch clicked into place once more. The sound, like the first, echoed for a fraction of a second before it was devoured. The clearing was as it had been before, a silent, impossible door, standing sentinel in the woods. But the four friends were irrevocably broken. The seal had been breached, and the park was now about to pay the terrible price for their curiosity. They ran. There was no other human response left to them. The moment the door clicked shut, the fragile constructs of reason and curiosity that had held them captive were shattered by a flood of pure, primal terror. This was not a retreat. It was a rout. They scrambled away from the clearing, their movements clumsy and uncoordinated. They abandoned precious equipment, a cooking pot, a water filter, Ben's now-dead audio recorder, anything that might slow them down. Their only instinct was to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the terrible truth they had just witnessed. But the horror was not confined to the clearing. They had closed the door, but they had not contained what came out. Liam was not okay. He stumbled as he ran, his right leg dragging behind him as if it were a foreign object. In a brief, chaotic fragment from Chloe's still recording camera, we see Maya trying to help him, half supporting his weight. "I can't feel it," he gasped, his voice tight with pain and disbelief. "Maya, I can't feel my foot." Later, in what would be the penultimate recovered file, Chloe's camera pans down to his leg. The footage is jerky, but the image is clear. The heavy canvas of his hiking trousers was intact, no tear, no burn, no mark whatsoever. But there, on the fabric covering his shin and boot, was a strange, grayish patch, as if the color had been leached directly from the material. He would later describe the sensation not as numbness, but as an absence. "It's a sleep," he told them, "but a deep sleep, a dead sleep." His leg had made contact, for a fraction of a second, with the spreading influence of the void. It was no longer entirely part of our world. It was the first casualty. But their personal horror was soon to be eclipsed by a far larger, all-encompassing one. The silence, the heavy, pressing nothingness they had felt in the clearing, was no longer confined there. It was moving with them. It was spreading. As they fled, they began to notice the world around them changing. The trees they ran past seemed to dim before their very eyes. The vibrant greens of the ferns and the rich, loamy browns of the forest floor were fading, desaturating into a dull, monochromatic gray. The very air, which should have been thick with the scent of pine and life, grew thin and sterile, tasting metallic on their tongues. They were running as fast as their exhausted bodies would allow, but they were making no progress against the phenomenon. They were trapped inside an expanding bubble of anti-reality. The stain was spreading, and they were at its center. Chloe's final recovered video file is a 30-second clip of pure, unmitigated chaos. The camera is bouncing violently, pointed mostly at the ground, capturing a blurred nightmare of gray leaves and racing feet. The audio is a cacophony of terror. We can hear Chloe's own ragged, panicked breathing. We can hear Maya's frantic shouts of encouragement to Liam. We can hear Ben, the sensitive soul who had come to listen to the forest song, openly sobbing, his spirit utterly broken. The last thing the camera's microphone picks up is Liam's voice. It is strangely calm, resigned, the voice of a scientist who has finally accepted an impossible new dataset. "It's no good," he says, his words cutting through the panic. "You can't outrun nothing." A moment later, there is a thud. The camera lens looks up at a canopy of gray, washed-out leaves for a second, and then the recording abruptly ends. The battery had died, or perhaps the camera itself had finally been consumed by the silence. This is where the personal horror of 4 individuals collides with the sterile bureaucracy of official procedure. 3 days later, on Friday, August 22nd, when the group failed to check in at the North Fork Ranger Station as stipulated by their hiking plan, they were officially declared missing. Search and rescue operations began immediately. The first teams, composed of seasoned park rangers and highly trained local volunteers, were deployed into the northern sector at dawn the next day. This is where the official story, the one released to the public, begins to diverge sharply from the truth. And it is here that we must rely on leaked internal documents and the harrowing, anonymous testimony of a former park ranger who was on that first search team. We will call him Ranger Miller. His decades of experience in Whispering Pines would be rendered meaningless by what he was about to encounter. Miller was part of Alpha Team, the first group to be airlifted to a landing zone near the entrance to the Ethelred Gorge. His official report, which we have viewed in its heavily redacted form, speaks only of unusual environmental conditions hampering the search. His personal journal, which his family later shared with a small circle of private investigators, tells the real, terrifying story. Journal entry: Saturday, August 23, 2025. Day 1 of the search for the missing hikers. Something is wrong up here. Terribly wrong. We crossed the ridge into the Ethelred Basin this morning around 1000 hours, and it was like a switch was thrown. The world just turned off. No birds. Not a single chirp. Not even a damn mosquito. I've been working in this park for 20 years. I've seen fires, floods, blizzards. I have never experienced anything like this. The air feels dead. The younger guys are spooked. I am too, if I'm being honest. It's like walking through a graveyard the size of a county. Miller's team discovered the trail of abandoned gear, the cooking pot, the sleeping bag. They confirmed they were on the right path. They found the group's first campsite by the creek, untouched. And then, half buried in the leaf litter where she had fallen, they found Chloe Reed's camera. Journal entry: Sunday, August 24, 2025. Found a digital camera. Batteries dead. Bagged it as evidence and sent it back with the supply chopper. The quiet is getting worse. It's not just an absence of sound anymore. Feels heavy, like a physical weight. Presses on your eardrums from the inside out. 2 of the volunteers are complaining of severe headaches and disorientation. Jim said his compass is spinning. I checked mine. The spinning too. The GPS units are useless. We called in our position, but the radio was just white noise. We're in the blind. The colors, everything looks washed out, like a faded photograph from the 70s. Ranger Miller and his team never found the clearing. They never found the door. It seems likely that the hikers, in their panicked and disoriented flight, had traveled in a wide, looping path away from it. But the search team was now deep inside the spreading stain. They were experiencing the exact same phenomenon that had driven the four friends to madness. The search was officially called off on the fifth day, citing, and I quote the declassified memo, anomalous meteorological and geological interference rendering all electronic equipment inoperable and posing a significant and undefined risk to personnel. Ranger Miller's last journal entry from the field is almost incoherent, a testament to a mind disintegrating under an unimaginable sensory assault. Journal entry, Tuesday, August 26, 2025. Can't hear. Ears pop. No sound. Woods are gray. All gray. Sun is pale. Feel nothing. Cold. Lost time. Hours are missing. Need to get out. The silence is eating the world. It's eating the thoughts in my head. Silence. Silence. See. The entry ends there. Miller and his team of 3 other men were eventually found by a second unit, wandering aimlessly near a service road miles from their search area. They were suffering from severe dehydration, hypothermia despite the warm weather, and what doctors at the containment facility would later term acute sensory deprivation psychosis. They were unable to provide a coherent account of their search. Miller, a man who had given his life to the Park Service, resigned 2 weeks later. He never set foot in a forest again. It was after the failure and the disturbing medical reports from this initial search that the federal government stepped in swiftly and silently. The public was told that Whispering Pines was being closed indefinitely due to extreme and unpredictable wildfire risk. It was a plausible lie. Behind a wall of secrecy and federal jurisdiction, a new, unnamed organization took over. In the few leaked memos that have surfaced, it is referred to only as Project Ecostasis. Their job was not search and rescue. It was not investigation. It was containment, because the stain was still spreading. Satellite imagery from that time, when compared to photos from just weeks earlier, confirms it. A near-perfect circular patch of land, centered deep within Ethelred Gorge, was losing its chlorophyll signature. It was turning gray. On the topographical maps of the secret project, it was labeled the Blight. And every day, the circle grew, expanding at an alarming, calculable rate of approximately 200 feet per day. Project Ecostasis had one single, desperate mission: to stop the gray, silent stain from spreading and swallowing the world. And what of the 4 friends? What of Liam, Chloe, Maya, and Ben? No trace of them was ever found. They were simply gone, erased, swallowed by the silent world they had unwittingly unleashed. Today they are officially listed as missing, presumed deceased. For more names on the long list of people claimed by the American wilderness. But we know better. They were not claimed by the wilderness. The wilderness itself was a victim. They were claimed by the opposite of it. They were claimed by the void that lies behind a simple wooden door. They opened that door, and in doing so, they broke the world inside Whispering Pines. And the park, in return, has been silent ever since. When the fabric of our reality is torn, the human mind does something remarkable. Tries to stitch it back together. Faced with an event so profoundly outside the bounds of our collective understanding, we scramble for explanation. We build frameworks of logic and speculation, not just to comprehend the event itself, but to protect ourselves from the terrifying implications of the unknown. It is a defense mechanism against the abyss. The story of Whispering Pines National Park is such a tear in reality. And in the decades since the fences went up, several theories have emerged from the shadowed corners where science, metaphysics, and folklore intersect. Each is an attempt to give a name to the horror, to put a face on the void. Let us examine the most prominent of these theories. This is perhaps the most common theory among those few who know the real story. It posits that the door is not an object in our world, but a gateway between worlds. a stable, physical bridge between our dimension, with its familiar laws of physics and biology, and another entirely different plane of existence. This other dimension, the theory proposes, is a universe of pure entropy, cosmic dead end, a place where the fundamental constants of nature have collapsed, resulting in a state of absolute zero energy, absolute zero life, and therefore absolute zero sound. The void the hikers saw was not darkness. It was a glimpse into a reality where the concept of existence, as we know it, has ceased. When Liam Sullivan turned that brass knob, he broke a seal between these two realities. The phenomenon that followed the oppressive silence, the life-draining blight, the graying of the world was the characteristic nature of the other dimension, leaking into ours. Our reality, vibrant and complex, was being overwritten by the stark, simple rules of the void. In this model, Project Ecostasis did not fix the problem. They could not. They merely performed a massive act of damage control, reinforcing the dimensional walls around the park, effectively quarantining the ontological infection. The silence remains because a piece of that other, dead universe is now permanently nested within our own, a tumor of nothingness contained by fences and top-secret technology. This theory dismisses the mystical and embraces the technological. It suggests the door is not a supernatural phenomenon, but a piece of highly advanced machinery, the purpose of which we can only guess. Perhaps it is a remnant of a lost, ancient civilization on Earth, one whose existence predates our own. Or, as some prefer, it is the work of a non-human intelligentsia piece of alien technology, abandoned or left dormant for millennia. In this context, the door could be anything: a form of terraforming device gone haywire, a waste disposal unit for materials so hazardous they must be exiled from space-time itself, or a can opener for reality, a tool for manipulating dimensions. Proponents of this theory point to the object's precision. Its seamless construction and impossible placement suggest design, not magic. When the hikers opened it, they might have triggered a catastrophic malfunction. The void they saw could have been the result of the device attempting to create a stable wormhole but failing, instead tearing a localized hole in space-time where physics simply ceased to function. The spreading silence, then, was the fallout from this technological filuria form of exotic radiation that doesn't just poison life, but actively cancels out the vibrations of sound and energy. The park today is a permanent technological dead zone, an area so saturated with this radiation that life, and even the propagation of sound waves, is impossible. This is the most abstract and, for many, the most unsettling theory. It draws from the philosophical concept of simulation theory, the hypothesis that our reality is, in fact, an incredibly advanced computer-generated simulation. In this chilling context, the door was not an object within the simulation, but a flaw in it. A piece of broken code made manifest, a developer's debugging tool, accidentally left behind by the programmers of our world. Think of it as clicking on a broken hyperlink on a website. It leads nowhere. It leads to a 404 not found error. The door, in this analogy, was a physical 404 error, standing in the middle of the forest. When Liam opened it, the group peered behind the graphical user interface of their reality. They saw the raw code, the empty command line, the nothingness upon which their world was built. The spreading silence, then, was the error corrupting adjacent data. The graying of the landscape was the world de-rendering, losing its complex textures, shaders, and color palettes. The failure of their compasses and GPS was the local system losing its connection to the main server. And Project Ecostasis, in this scenario, is not a government entity, but a team of system administrators, beings who are aware of the simulation's nature. They simply quarantined the corrupted sector of the hard drive to prevent it from crashing the entire program. Whispering Pines isn't silent because something is there. It's silent because, on a fundamental code level, nothing is there anymore. It's a deleted portion of the world map. Finally, there is a darker, more mythological interpretation. This theory suggests the door was not a passage, but a prison, a seal on a tomb. It was placed in the deep wilderness not as a path for travelers, but as a lock to protect them. Inside, an ancient non-physical entity was contained, a being of pure consumption, of silence, of anti-life. A primordial force that hungers for energy, for sound, for existence itself. The door was the final barrier, the lock on its cage. The four friends, in their innocent curiosity, did not just open a door. They broke the seal. They unlocked the cage. The void they saw was not an empty space, but a glimpse of the entity's true, incomprehensible form. The silence that followed was its influence, its very presence, seeping into the world and snuffing out the life around it like a candle flame. In this scenario, the park is not empty. It is occupied. The silence is not an absence, but a presence, a will. The work of Project Ecostasis was not to contain a leak, but to perform a massive technological binding ritual, reinforcing the prison walls around an entity that is now awake, aware, and constantly pressing against its new, larger cage. The park is silent because the being inside demands it. It is a silence of enforced reverence. What is the truth? We may never know. The files remain classified. The park remains a ghost on the map. But the fate of Liam, Chloe, Maya, and Ben serves as the ultimate, chilling postscript to all these theories. Were they simply annihilated, pulled into the void, or was it something worse? Liam's numb, dead leg might offer the most terrifying clue. Perhaps contact with the void doesn't kill you in a biological sense. Perhaps it simply erases you, bit by bit. Their final, frantic moments might not have been a run from death, but a race against their own deletion from existence. A fate arguably worse than any death we can imagine. Today, Whispering Pines National Park is a permanent warning. The perimeter is monitored by silent, unmarked helicopters and motion sensors that detect nothing. Thermal imaging shows the interior of the park is, on average, several degrees colder than the surrounding land. A permanent, unnatural cold spot that defies meteorological explanation. No animal dares to cross the fence line. Birds flying overhead, upon reaching the edge of the blight, will abruptly change course, skirting the boundary of the silent zone as if hitting an invisible wall of glass. The world of life seems to know, on a deep and primal level, that this place is no longer a part of it. This is the legacy of that fateful day. A story of how quickly the world we think we know can be peeled back to reveal an abyss of utter incomprehensibility. It's a reminder that not all who wander are lost, but some who wander find things that ensure they will never be found again. The wilderness holds many secrets, many protocols for survival. But the lesson of Whispering Pines is perhaps the most fundamental. Respect the unknown. Respect the silence. And if you are ever walking in the deep, quiet woods and you find a door where no door should be turned around, walk away. Do not, under any circumstances, open it. Some things are not meant for us to see, and some places are meant to be left alone, forever. The story of Whispering Pines is a deeply unsettling one, and it's a file we at the Wilderness Protocol have been compiling for years. The fragmented evidence only deepens the mystery and underscores the profound strangeness that can lie just off the beaten path. What do you think happened to those four hikers? What is the nature of the door they found? Is it a portal, a piece of tech, a glitch, or something far older? Let us know your theories in the comments below. We read all of them, and the collective insight of this community is an invaluable tool in our investigations. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the silence. If you believe, as we do, that these stories need to be told, that the world is wilder and more mysterious than we are led to believe, then please consider liking this video and subscribing to the Wilderness Protocol. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next expedition into the unknown. Stay safe, stay curious, and respect the wilderness.